I want to tell you something I've never said out loud before. Not in a therapy room, not to my best friend, not even to myself, at least not in any way that I let myself actually hear it. I want to say it here now in this moment because I think some part of you already knows what I'm about to confess, and maybe you've been waiting for someone to finally say it the way it lives inside you. I was 31 years old, standing in the middle of an apartment I had worked 4 years to afford, and I felt absolutely nothing, not peace, not pride, not the quiet satisfaction that all the productivity podcasts promised would arrive when you finally hit the number, finally signed the lease, finally became the version of yourself you had been engineering since you were 19 years old, sitting in a dorm room with a notebook full of 5-year plans. None of that arrived. What arrived instead was a silence so heavy it had weight, a stillness that wasn't rest, an emptiness dressed in good furniture and ambient lighting and a view of the city that other people would have photographed for their stories. I stood there, and I thought, is this it? And then I sat down on the floor. Not because I was tired, but because my legs just stopped believing in the point of standing. Let me take you back. Because this story doesn't begin at 31. It begins much earlier in a house where love was something you earned, where approval was a currency, and you learned very quickly how to work for it. I'm not here to condemn anyone who raised me. They did the best they could with what they had. But what I absorbed, deep in the marrow of who I was becoming, was a simple and devastating equation: perform, and you will be loved. Rest, and you will disappear. So I performed. God, did I perform. I built a morning routine that started at 5. I built discipline before I built character. I built productivity systems in notebooks and apps and color-coded calendars. I built a reputation at work before I built a relationship with myself. I built walls around my vulnerability and called them standards. I built distance from anyone who got too close and called it independence. I built an identity entirely out of output, entirely out of what I could show, what I could prove, what I could point to. When someone asked me who I was, who are you? I have a degree, I have a title, I have a savings rate of 30%. I wake up early, I train 5 days a week, I read, I journal, I optimize. That was my answer. For years, that was my entire answer to the question of who I am. Not, I am someone who is afraid of being known. Not, I am someone who has never once asked for help without feeling like I was bleeding out on someone's floor. Not, I am someone who has achieved so much and felt so little that sometimes I wonder if there's something fundamentally wrong with me. No, none of that. Just the resume, just the metrics. Just the external architecture of a man who had built everything except a home inside himself. Wait. Before you scroll, I need you to stay here for a second. I know what this feels like from the outside. You're watching, listening, and part of you is nodding. Part of you is recognizing something. And another part of you, the part that has survived by staying armored, is already preparing its defense, already forming the thought, this isn't me. I'm fine. I've got it together. I'm handling it. Don't deny it. I know because that was my defense too. I'm handling it. Those 3 words, I cannot tell you how many years I hid behind those 3 words. I'm handling it. As if handling something is the same as being okay with it. As if managing pain is the same as healing it. As if the performance of composure is the same as the experience of peace. It is not, and somewhere in you already know that she came into my life on an ordinary Tuesday. No dramatic entrance, no cinematic lighting. She was just there, sitting across from me at a table, in a conversation that started about something completely unremarkable. And she looked at me with these eyes that didn't ask anything of me. That was the first thing I noticed. Not her age, not the years between us. And yes, she was older, meaningfully older, and we'll get to what that meant, what it unlocked, what it terrified me with and freed me from. But the first thing I noticed was simply this. She wasn't asking me to perform. Most interactions I had, and I say this without bitterness, just clarity, most interactions I had existed inside an unspoken economy of impression management. You show your best version. You're charming or competent or interesting or ambitious. You give people a version of you that they can admire or desire or be impressed by, and in return they give you their approval, their attention, their presence. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. She didn't make that deal. She just looked at me and asked me something simple. And when I answered, when I gave her the polished answer, the articulate answer, the answer I had rehearsed 1,000 times in 1,000 different conversations, she paused and she said very quietly, "That's not really what you meant, is it?" And I didn't know what to do with that. I thought I was the one who was supposed to have answers. I thought experience was supposed to mean the younger one learns from the older one, and that's it. That's the dynamic. That's how it works. I thought I understood things because I had read things, consumed things, optimized things. I thought intellectual preparation was the same as emotional wisdom, and I was so spectacularly wrong about that that even saying it now I feel something shift in my chest. She had lived. Actually lived, not performed living, actually moved through seasons of it. Loss and beginning. the kind of grief that teaches you what you're made of, the kind of joy that doesn't announce itself but arrives slowly like light through a curtain, the kind of love that had already taught her what love is not and what it is and how to know the difference. She carried all of that not as biography but as texture, as a quality of presence, as a way of being in a room that said, I am not afraid of what's real, and I'd never been around anything like that in my life. Tell me something. When was the last time someone gave you their full attention? Not their phone in pocket, half listening, waiting to respond attention. Not the performance of listening, but actual, complete, undivided presence, the kind where you could feel that the person across from you had decided, for this moment, that nothing else in the world was more important than the exact thing you were saying right now. When was that? I'll wait, because I realized, sitting with her in those early weeks, that I had almost no memory of that experience. I'd been surrounded by people my whole life, friends, colleagues, family, romantic partners, and I had almost never felt truly witnessed. And more than that, I had never truly offered it. I had been physically present while being mentally absent 10,000 times. I had nodded while planning my next sentence. I had said I understand without ever actually trying to. I had mistaken my ability to talk about connection for the actual practice of it. She showed me the difference just by being different. I built a version of strength that had no room for softness. I thought softness was the enemy of discipline. I thought vulnerability was the leak in the armor, the crack in the system, the variable that would undermine everything if I let it have any space at all. I thought asking for help was evidence of insufficiency. I thought needing someone, really needing them, the deep animal need for another human being who truly knows you, was weakness, dependency, failure of self-sufficiency that I had been conditioned to treat as the ultimate virtue. I thought I needed to have it all handled before I could deserve to be loved. Let me say that again. Let me say it slowly so you can feel it land. In whatever place inside you it needs to land. I thought I needed to have it all handled before I could deserve to be loved. That sentence ran my entire life. That sentence dictated every relationship I entered, every wall I built, every version of myself I presented. Because if love is something you earn through performance, if the equation you absorbed in childhood is achieve and you will belong, struggle, and you will be abandoned, then you never let anyone see the struggle. You never show the cracks. You show up polished. You show up functional. You show up with your 5-year plan and your morning routine and your clean apartment, and you give people the highlight reel and call it intimacy. And then you wonder why you feel alone even when someone is lying next to you. She didn't try to fix me. I want to be very clear about that, because that's not what this story is. This is not the story of a woman who came along and saved a broken man. That would be a different kind of story. Comfortable in its simplicity, romantic in its distortion. And it would be a lie. She didn't fix me. She just didn't leave when I was unfixable. There's a difference that took me a long time to understand. Fixing is an act of repair. It implies the other person is the problem, the project, the thing to be corrected. Staying is something else entirely. Staying is an act of faith. Staying is the quiet daily decision to remain in the presence of someone's process without needing them to complete it for your own comfort. It is extraordinarily rare. And when you encounter it, when you first feel what it's like to be in a room with someone who is not secretly waiting for you to become less complicated, it is disorienting in the most beautiful possible way, because you don't know how to receive it. You're so conditioned to earn your place in someone's life that grace, the kind of presence that isn't conditional, feels suspicious, feels like a trap. Your nervous system, trained in the economy of performance, keeps waiting for the bill, keeps waiting for the moment. She names her price, reveals the terms, shows you where the conditions were hiding all along. But the bill didn't come. The terms didn't reveal themselves. She was just there, consistently, quietly, honestly, and slowly, terrifyingly slowly, I began to let myself believe it. Here's what I learned about the age between us. I learned that years do not automatically produce wisdom, but living through them with intention does. I learned that someone who has already passed through a season of life you are still approaching carries a map you cannot draw for yourself. Not better than yours, not a replacement for yours, but a perspective that exists beyond your current horizon. I learned that loving someone older can feel at first like an act of humility that pride resists, because you are supposed to be the one who knows things, who leads, who sets the pace. And when that story collapses, when the years between you become not a gap but a gift, it requires a renegotiation of identity that cuts deeper than you expect. I had to stop being the expert of my own life, long enough to be a student of someone else's wisdom. I had to unlearn the arrogance that I had dressed up as confidence. I had to sit in conversations where she had lived through something I only had theories about and stay there, in the discomfort of that gap, without reaching for my phone or my defense mechanisms, or the reflex of redirecting the conversation back to territory where I felt competent. That is harder than anything on any productivity list I've ever written. And it is more transformative. Look at me for a second. I want to talk about what collapse actually is, because we talk about rock bottom like it's a disaster, like it's the worst possible thing, like the goal is to never arrive there. We build entire architectures of avoidance around the possibility of falling apart. We schedule and optimize and hustle and plan precisely because some part of us suspects that if we actually stop, something will crumble that we won't be able to put back together. And here's the truth, we're right. Something will crumble. It will absolutely come apart. But here's what they don't tell you. Sometimes what crumbles wasn't holding you up. Sometimes what crumbles is the prison. Sometimes what falls is not the foundation of your life, but the performance of it. And underneath the rubble, underneath all the metrics and the morning routines and the polished answers, there is something that has been waiting, quiet and patient, for the noise to stop. There is you, the actual you, the one that existed before the world told you what to build and who to be and how to make yourself valuable enough to take up space. The collapse is not the end of you. The collapse is the mercy. The collapse is the invitation. I started rebuilding, but this time differently. This time not an empire, not a monument, not an architecture of impression. This time something smaller, something quieter, something that could actually hold weight without requiring applause to stand up. I built presence first, before the goals, before the plans, before the new systems. I built the practice of being where I actually was, of sitting with her at a table in the evening and not scrolling, of listening without waiting, of looking at her face, really looking at it, and letting the fact of her arrive in me instead of flowing through me on the way to the next thing. It sounds so simple. It is not simple. For someone who has lived at the speed of achievement, presence is a discipline that makes the gym look easy. Because the gym asks nothing of your inner life. You just move your body and the results follow. But presence, real presence, requires that you show up without armor, without agenda, without the protective momentum of productivity. It requires that you be with what is instead of racing toward what could be. I failed at it constantly in the beginning. I would be there and then not there. I would have a conversation and realize halfway through that I had been performing, listening, instead of doing it. I would make a promise to myself this evening, nothing else, just this, and then find my mind drifting to a problem at work, a message I hadn't sent, a goal I hadn't tracked, and she would notice, not with accusation, just with a quiet, patient noticing. And sometimes she would put her hand on the table, not reaching for mine, just placing it there, and that small, unhurried gesture would pull me back, not with words, not with correction, just with the undeniable warmth of someone who was still there, still choosing to be there, still holding the space open for me to return to. Here's what I learned about fear. The deepest fear I carried was not failure. It was not poverty. It was not rejection in any ordinary sense. The deepest fear, the one that ran everything, that shaped every wall and every hustle and every polished answer, was the fear of being fully known and found insufficient. The fear that if someone saw all of it, the confusion beneath the confidence, the loneliness beneath the sociability, the deep and abiding uncertainty beneath the systems and the plans, they would decide I wasn't worth staying for. This is the wound that productivity is often trying to cover. This is what the empire is built on top of. Not ambition, not vision. Fear. The fear that if you ever stop building, stop proving, stop performing, if you ever just are without all of it, no one will want to be there. No one will choose you for who you are without the achievements as evidence of your value. And when someone actually does choose you, not the resume, not the morning routine, not the 5-year plan, but you, the uncertain, crumbling, trying to figure it out you, it breaks something open in you that you've been keeping locked for so long that you forgot it was even there. It breaks open the place where love was always meant to live. Don't deny it. You've been running the same equation. I can feel it, not because I know you specifically, but because I know the equation. I know what it feels like to believe in the architecture of your deepest assumptions that you have to earn your place in the world. That rest is laziness. That need is weakness. That asking for help is an admission of failure. That love is something you deserve only after you have perfected yourself enough to be worth it. You've been performing, haven't you? Not for social media, not for the audience, for yourself, performing even in the privacy of your own mind, holding yourself to a standard of function and productivity and emotional containment that no human being can actually sustain, and then feeling quietly broken every time you fall short, which is every day, which is all the time. You are so tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The bone-deep, identity-deep exhaustion of holding a shape that isn't yours, and you have been holding it for so long that you don't even know what your actual shape is anymore. She asked me once. We were sitting on the floor of the apartment, late, and the city was doing its city thing outside the window. She asked me, What would you do with your life if you didn't have to prove anything to anyone? And I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. I sat with that silence. And it was not comfortable silence. It was the silence of a man encountering a question that the entire architecture of his life had been specifically designed never to ask. Because that question is a door. And behind that door is everything that got postponed while the proving was happening. Every version of yourself that got set aside in the service of the version that other people would approve of. I sat in that silence for a long time, and she didn't rush me, she didn't offer suggestions, she didn't fill the space with something more comfortable, she just stayed in the silence with me, present in it, as if this particular silence was not something to escape, but something to inhabit, as if something necessary was happening there, and I began to answer that question slowly over the following months, not all at once, not in a revelation, in the way that actual change happens, quietly, imperfectly, in small daily choices that add up to a different kind of life. I started saying no to things I had only been doing for approval, not dramatically, just quietly declining to keep performing for rooms that didn't actually see me anyway. I started calling people I loved without having an agenda, just calling, just saying I was thinking about you. Feeling the strange and unfamiliar warmth of connection that has no transactional purpose, I started resting without guilt. I cannot tell you how revolutionary this was for someone who had treated every moment of rest as a deficit to be justified. I started sitting, just sitting, not productive sitting, not mindful practice as optimization sitting, just being a person who sometimes sits without it meaning anything about their discipline or their focus or their future. I started telling her the truth, not the polished truth, the actual truth. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. I think I've been confusing movement with direction for most of my adult life. I don't know who I am when I'm not achieving something. I need help. I actually need help, and she held those words, every one of them, without flinching, without retreating, without the slight shift in posture that I had always dreaded, the one that meant, this is too much, you are too much. I was expecting someone more together than this. She held them, and she said, I know, I've known, I've been waiting for you to say it. Here's what I learned about love. Love is not a reward. It is not the prize at the end of the achievement arc, the relationship you deserve once you become good enough, stable enough, worthy enough. Love is not something that arrives when the building is finished. Love is what makes it possible to keep building even when the building falls apart. Love is the thing that exists in the falling apart. Love is not the empire. Love is the home, and a home is not a monument. A home is the place you come back to when everything outside has stripped you down to your actual self. I had been building empires and calling them homes. I had been filling rooms with accomplishments and calling it a life. She was the first person who let me understand the difference. Not by lecturing me about it, not by telling me what I was missing, but by being in her presence with me what the difference actually feels like when you're inside it. The years between us taught that time is not only forward, that experience is not only accumulation, that someone who has already moved through chapters you are still in the middle of is not above you or ahead of you in any competitive sense. They are simply carrying light from a direction you haven't traveled yet. And if you are humble enough, if you are honest enough, if you can set down the performance of having it together long enough to actually reach for someone's hand in the dark, you will find that the light they carry is not theirs to keep. It's the kind that multiplies when it's shared. I want to talk about what we don't talk about. I want to talk about the men, and I'm speaking to men specifically for a moment, though I know this reaches further. I want to talk about the men who have been taught that emotional need is a character flaw, who were handed a definition, strength that had nothing in it about honesty, nothing in it about asking, nothing in it about the extraordinary courage it takes to sit with someone you love and say, I am not okay, and I don't know how to fix it, and I need you to stay anyway. We weren't taught that this is strength. We were taught that this is weakness. We were taught to handle it, to push through, to build more, to achieve our way out of the feeling, to stay productive enough that the emptiness never has room to take shape. And it works. For a while, it genuinely works. The hustle is effective at drowning out the signal. The achievement is very good at simulating meaning. The empire is an impressive structure while it stands, but you cannot build your way into peace. You cannot optimize your way into love. You cannot achieve your way into the experience of being known and knowing and resting in the warmth of that mutual recognition. You have to stop and feel and ask and stay. Those verbs are the ones that build the only thing worth living in. I think about the version of myself that sat on that floor at 31 in the silence of an apartment full of everything except what I actually needed. I think about how close that moment was to becoming another chapter of numbing, another project, another goal, another upward graph to pursue until the next collapse. I think about the grace of having met someone before I had completely calcified, before the performance had fully replaced the person, before the empire had become so total that there was no crack left for light to enter. I think about what it means to be chosen by someone who had the wisdom of years and the courage to use it, who did not need me to be impressive, who did not require me to be consistent, who stayed not because I had my life together, but because she could see underneath everything I had built that there was someone worth staying for. And I think about what it asked of me in return. It asked me to see myself the same way. That was the hardest thing, harder than the discipline, harder than the training, harder than any of the external building I had ever done. Looking at myself, the unbuilt self, the uncertain self, the self that didn't know what he would do if he didn't have to prove anything, and deciding that this was also worth staying for, deciding that I was allowed to be loved not as a finished product, but as a person in process. Here's what I learned about time. We spend so much of it in the future, planning, projecting, envisioning, building toward. And there is a place for that. There is real and necessary virtue in looking ahead, in knowing where you're going, in having something to move toward. But there is a version of future orientation that is not vision. It is avoidance. It is the refusal to be here now, in this moment, which is the only moment that is actually happening, because here contains things that feel too big, too uncertain, too uncomfortable to stay with. She taught me to stay, not with lectures, with her presence, with the quiet, repeated, daily demonstration of what it looks like to be in your life, instead of managing it from a careful distance, to eat a meal and taste it, to have a conversation and be in it, to feel something and let it move through you instead of rerouting it immediately into productivity. I started staying in the mornings. I stayed in the first hour, not building, not planning, just being awake in the world and letting that be enough. In conversations, I stayed until they were finished instead of leaving half of my attention in the next item on the agenda. In difficult feelings, I stayed long enough to actually learn what they were trying to tell me instead of outrunning them before they could speak. And staying changed everything, not dramatically, not overnight, but in the way that roots change everything, invisibly underground, taking hold in ways that only become visible later when the storms come and you realize with quiet astonishment that you are not falling. Look at me for a second. I want to say something directly to whoever is watching this and feeling somewhere in the architecture of their chest that they have been waiting for permission, that they have been holding something real and true and tender, and they have been waiting for someone to tell them that it is safe to set it down, that they are allowed to stop holding the shape and just be the person underneath it. You are allowed to not have it together. You are allowed to need someone. You are allowed to love a person who does not fit the template, older, unexpected, presenting a different geography of experience than the one you had mapped in advance. You are allowed to be chosen and to believe it. You are allowed to let someone know you, the real you, the uncertain you, the one that lives beneath the discipline and the achievements and the polished answers, and not immediately brace for the moment they decide it's too much. You are allowed to be loved in your actual life, not the version of it you're still working toward. We are so afraid of the detour. We are so afraid that the unexpected, the person who wasn't part of the plan, the love that doesn't match the blueprint, the relationship that asks us to revise our understanding of who we are, is a mistake, a sidetrack, an indulgence that will cost us the life we were supposed to be building. What if the unexpected is the life? What if the revision is not the detour from the story, but the story itself? The part where the character stops confusing the map for the territory and finally walks into the actual landscape and discovers that it is more beautiful and more terrifying and more worth being in than anything they could have planned? I chose her, knowing the years between us, knowing the conversations it would invite from people who had opinions about what that meant, knowing that nothing about it was in the 5-year plan or the notebook or the optimized system I had built to navigate my life. I chose her because she was real in a way that made everything I had built feel like rehearsal, and in doing so, in making one unoptimized, unplanned, completely human choice, I learned more about who I actually was than I had in years of deliberate self-construction. Here's what I learned about the bricks. I had been building with the wrong material, not wrong in a moral sense, wrong in an engineering sense. I had been building with performance and appearance which are load-bearing under good conditions, but which crumble under the real weight of a real life. What I needed, what I didn't know I needed, were different bricks. Presence, honesty, vulnerability, not as exposure, but as courage. The willingness to be known, the practice of staying, the daily, unglamorous, uncelebrated choice to show up as yourself instead of the version that photographs well. These bricks don't trend. These bricks don't make good content. These bricks are not impressive at dinner parties or professional gatherings. These bricks are just quietly, stubbornly, persistently, the only ones that hold when it rains, and it will rain. It always rains. The question is not whether your life will be tested. The question is what you built when you had the choice of materials. She is not perfect. I want to say that too. This is not a story of discovering a flawless person and being saved by her perfection. She has her own closed rooms, her own places where old wounds still make themselves known, her own seasons of distance and difficulty, and the particular stubbornness of someone who has survived a lot and therefore has strong opinions about how to navigate the world. We are not a fairy tale. We are two people who chose, daily, imperfectly, sometimes with great effort, to stay in each other's reality instead of retreating into the comfortable distance of managed impression. And the days when it is hard, when the distance creeps in, when the old patterns reassert themselves, when I find myself armoring up out of habit and she finds herself doing the same, those days are not evidence that it isn't working. Those days are the work. Those days are the practice. Those days are where the real depth of choosing someone gets made. You do not build a home in the easy days. You build it in the difficult ones when staying requires something more than comfort and something better than instinct. I think about the altar I used to build to productivity, the hours I gave to it, the mornings I woke in the dark and offered to it, the relationships I kept at a careful distance in service of it, the seasons of my own life I moved through without tasting because I was too focused on building toward the next one. I think about all of that and I feel not regret exactly, because regret is not useful, and also I'm not sure I could have arrived here without going through there, but something like tenderness for the person I was, for how hard he was working, and how little of the work was actually directed at anything that would matter to him in the end. He was doing the best he knew how. He was building what he had been taught to build. He was running the equation that had been handed to him before he was old enough to question it. And now I am standing on the other side of the collapse with different hands and different knowledge, and the slow, ongoing daily practice of building differently. This is the part where I talk about what I want for you, not what I want from you. What I want for you, I want you to have one conversation this week where you tell the truth, not the whole truth all at once. That's not realistic, and it's also not necessary. Just one more degree of honesty than usual, one moment where instead of the polished answer, you offer the uncertain one. One place where instead of performing okayness, you let someone into the actual weather of your interior life. I want you to stop for 5 minutes today, not as a productivity technique, not as a mindfulness optimization, but as an act of simple humanity, and feel where you actually are, not where your plan says you should be, not where the metrics suggest you're heading, where you actually right now in this body, in this moment are. I want you to think about who you have been keeping at a careful distance, who you've been giving the highlight reel while withholding the actual film. And I want you to just consider what it might feel like to let them a little further in. And if there is someone in your life, unexpected, imperfect, maybe older, maybe younger, maybe nothing like what you planned, who stays, who is honest with you, who holds the space open even when you disappear into your armor, I want you to let them, just let them. My love is older than me. She has years on me that I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand. She has carried things I haven't reached yet and survived seasons I can only imagine. She looks at the world with a patience that I am still learning. And she loves with a clarity that only comes from having already learned what love is not. And my heart, my unoptimized, unscheduled, completely irrational human heart, chose her. Before I had a framework for it, before I had a plan, before I had any idea what it would ask of me and what it would give back, my heart chose her. And it was the most intelligent thing I've ever done. We're standing here now, on the other side of the collapse, with a different kind of home. Not a monument, not an empire. Something smaller, warmer, with foundations that took longer to lay because they were laid correctly. Something that was built not to impress but to last. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to actually hold the weight of two real people living real lives together. Something that exists not in the highlight reel but in the Tuesday evenings and the Sunday mornings, in the difficult conversations and the unguarded moments and the quiet, unglamorous daily practice of choosing each other again. That is the home I live in now. That is the life I chose when I finally stopped performing and started building something worth living in. Don't deny it. You know what I'm talking about. You know what's waiting on the other side of the performance. You know what's been quiet underneath the achieving. You know the version of yourself that has been patient there in the dark, waiting for you to stop running long enough to finally come home. It is not too late. The collapse, if it's coming, is mercy. The emptiness, if it's here, is the invitation. The unexpected love, if it's standing in front of you, is not the detour. It is the destination you didn't know you were moving toward. Go home. Build something that holds. Choose someone who stays. And when they look at you, really look at you, the whole complicated, uncertain, trying to figure it out you, let yourself be seen. That is where your actual life begins.